Welcome to the Catching Up with Casey show. If you are tired of chasing buy-in, frustrated with teams who can't seem to get on the same page, or over the constant struggle of holding people accountable without micromanaging, this is the show for you. I'm Casey Watts, speaker, author, and the creator of the Clarity Cycle Framework. I help leaders just like you take teams from frustration to alignment so teams can work collectively toward a common purpose in a committed way instead of against each other as though they are functioning in different organizations. And we do it all through the craft of clarity. Whether you lead from the middle or you are the front-facing leader of your organization, on this show, we bring clarity to the seemingly small things in leadership that make the biggest difference, because clarity precedes capacity. Now, with all of that said, let's dive into today's episode. Hey everybody, welcome to today's episode. I don't know when you are joining. I don't know where you are joining from, but regardless, I hope that this episode is very helpful for you, especially for instructional leaders who are starting the school year. I know right here where I am in East Texas, a lot of people started in-service today. And I also know that with in-service comes future data meetings. Now, part of in-service, a whole chunk of in-service actually, is just getting through logistics, procedures, campus handbook, all of those kinds of things. But before long, it's probably going to be the case that you are meeting with teams to talk about data. And as that gets closer, you're going to want to be really prepared. So today we are bringing clarity to 3 moves you can make before your first data meeting. 3 moves you can make before your first data meeting. Okay, so today, before we even get started, I do want to let you know, I'm sharing my screen to show a few different slides. They're not necessary for you to be able to see, but if you do want to see them, be sure you go to either LinkedIn or YouTube, and you can find this event live on either one of those channels. If you are great at visualizing, great. Visualize away as you listen to this podcast episode on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And if you want to dig a little bit deeper into this content, I need you to know that this content is something that I often bring to campuses to work with instructional leadership teams so that they can lead collaborative team meetings around data in a really purposeful, intentional, and yes, more comfortable way. Because if I'm being honest with you, and I plan to do that in this episode and every episode that I do, you and I both know that sometimes data meetings can feel uncomfortable, right? And that's what I want to start with. I want us to think about the data meetings that you have been a part of, the data meetings that you have facilitated, and chances are some of your experiences could be somewhat negative, meaning you either have attended a data meeting where you felt a little bit victimized because of the data that you were bringing to the meeting. Maybe that was your experience as a teacher, or you were a facilitator of a data meeting and you felt as though people were closed up, locked up, and didn't want to share anything that allowed your organization to move forward based on the data that you were exploring, right? So a lot of the times this can happen. I want us to remember that everyone has a personal experience that they are bringing to the table, and our previous experiences control the narrative. Let me say that again. Your previous experiences, our prior experiences, control the narrative. So if I have negative experiences with data meetings, then that's going to control the narrative for future data meetings. I often say when I'm training people through this content on their campus or in their district, or even doing this at a conference session, what I often say is it's like going to the dentist, right? Everybody has different experiences going to the dentist. For some people, they really, really despise going to the dentist because chances are they've had a negative experience at the dentist before. But for some of us, like me, I've not really had any bad experiences going to the dentist. Now, is it something I love doing? Not really. But I don't mind going to the dentist because I know that it's going to be all right. It's not usually painful. And my teeth feel and look better when I leave every single time. But again, that's not the case for everyone. And our data meetings are very much the same way. So let me say it again, experiences, even perceived experiences, control the narrative. What do I mean by perceived experiences? I want you to imagine a first or second year teacher coming to a data meeting. A person who has not had any experiences with data meetings before. They may have a perceived narrative or a perceived experience because of what they have heard from other people. So, in some way, a narrative has been created that is either positive or negative, or sometimes just neutral. So, what we often experience are sometimes people who are coming to data meetings and they're frustrated. It's like that dreaded alarm clock that they don't want to turn on. They just want to keep hitting snooze. They don't want to go to the meeting. Then there are people who experience team members coming to these collaborative data meetings and they are collaborating effectively around the data and they are leaving reflecting not only on the data, but their instructional practices. And then there are some times where people are coming to your data meetings either really unsure about the expectations, and because they're unsure about what to expect, they lock up and they don't quite share as much as you would like them to, or what they do share is not helpful in producing outcomes. So I'm going to share my screen again. If you are just joining us, remember, if you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and you want to see these slides, come on over to YouTube or LinkedIn. If you want to connect with me after listening to all of this and see how we can bring this to your instructional leadership teams so they can plan for meetings on purpose, let's have a chat, schedule a call with me. You can go to bit.ly/discover with Casey. Okay, so here we go. This is one of my very favorite quotes from, I'm going to make myself a little bit bigger. This is one of my very favorite quotes from I want to say this comes from Susan Scott, who talks about, she wrote the book Fierce Conversations. It's a fantastic read. But what she says is when we lack clarity, we are unable to create new mastery experiences. So if people lack clarity around what to expect in a data meeting and they only have negative mastery experiences, then it is unlikely that we are going to be able to create new mastery experiences. However, if we can create clarity around what to expect and how data meetings go on our campus, then we can begin to create new mastery experiences for them. Side note, it takes up to, if not more than 7 new mastery experiences that are positive to outweigh negative experiences. Okay. So our job is to create positive mastery experiences for the people who are coming to our meetings. So I want you to be thinking just for yourself, in what ways do we lack clarity as instructional leaders when it comes to having data meetings that are effective, productive, and positive? There could be 3 different things. We're really only bringing clarity to one of those things today. One of those things could be we lack clarity around how to prep for purposeful conversations. Another could be that we lack clarity around how to be a dialogical partner during meetings. And then finally, the third thing that we often lack clarity around is how to navigate things that feel difficult to say. Those crucial or hard conversations, what we often label as difficult conversations. The third thing that we lack clarity around, that navigating difficult conversations, is one of the trainings that is most popular, and it's no surprise, right? We want to know how to have productive conversations where we feel more comfortable bringing difficult things to the table instead of feeling like they're always difficult conversations that we often avoid. Tonight, what I want to bring clarity to is this very first thing, and that's how to prep for purposeful conversations. After all, This episode is titled 3 Moves to Make Before Your First Data Meeting. Okay. So I want to ask you just to reflect for a little bit. When you're reflecting on your data meetings, here are a few questions to consider. First, how do you prepare staff for conversations about data at the beginning of the year? How are you preparing your staff for conversations about data at the beginning of the year? The second question to reflect on is, how do you set them up for success? And the third is, what training takes place? What training takes place in order for your people to have productive data meetings later on? Now, I am not saying that as you think about these things, that they need to happen within the first 2 weeks of school. You probably have in-service going on that is already jam-packed with things. And if you push this out to your people, it may go in one ear and out the other because they are overwhelmed. There's too much on their plates right now. We don't even have data necessarily to look at that we feel like is meaningful just yet. So these kinds of things that you do with your staff could wait until you get closer to actually having data meetings. But let's go back to that first question. How do you prepare staff for conversations about data at the beginning of the year? And again, not necessarily like first couple of weeks, but within the first 6 weeks of the school year. We have made this assumption time and again that because people are labeled as teachers and they have a degree, that they inherently know how to have conversations about data. We make the assumption that they know how to analyze data. We make the assumption that they're going to know what to do based on results that they see from the data. But these are all just big old assumptions. They're huge assumptions that we're making that we absolutely should not be making. And instead, we need to develop some common definitions and common understanding around, what do we mean when we say data? What are the different types of data that we're going to pour over when we come to these meetings? What do you need to come to these meetings with? How are you going to prepare for meetings so they're successful? What does it look like to analyze data? Let's talk about what that looks like on this campus or in this district. People are coming to your campus from all over. Brand new teachers who have no experience, people who have come from another state, another grade level, a different campus, a different district. We want to make sure that everyone has a common understanding around these things so that we can set them up for success when they come to these meetings. We don't want to leave anything up to question. We don't want to assume that they know what this meeting is going to look like. Okay? How do you set them up for success? What training takes place? So here's what I'm advocating for. Here are the 3 things that you're going to do before the first data meeting. First, you are going to train your people on the purpose of the different data meetings that you have. We also make the assumption that when we say data meeting, it's going to be the same kind of meeting every single time. That is not always the case. Sometimes when we get together and we're considering data, and let me just pause real quick. Every meeting you have revolves around some kind of data, okay? If I was to have a conversation with a friend at a coffee shop and we are talking about some things our kids are going through and how we're handling it, we are talking about data. We bring data to every single conversation and every single meeting we have. That means that not every meeting can be labeled a data meeting because we may be doing something different with the data. For example, is your purpose in bringing data to a meeting to brainstorm around it? Are we just brainstorming things? Or are we actually analyzing the data? Is this a data analysis meeting? Or is it a meeting where we are making decisions on the data? So be sure before you go into these meetings, you and your campus are talking about the different things that are going to be happening with the data at meetings. And that way you can say to them, next week we are having a data meeting where we XYZ. Be explicit about that. But they need to know ahead of time, what are the different things we're going to do with data? Why does it matter? And what does it help us to turn around and do next? So that's thing number one. Be sure you set a purpose for the different data meetings that you have and train people on those different purposes. Number two, set success criteria for your meetings. So when I talk to you about training your people at the beginning of the year and setting them up for success, you want to spend some time talking about success criteria. We will know we have had successful conversations around the data if or when. Develop that success criteria so that when we go into the data meetings, we know exactly what's going to be the result of the success criteria. What are we going to see happening throughout this meeting and as a result of this meeting is what I really want to say there. Okay, so be sure you're setting success criteria for the different data meetings. And then the third thing, this is the final thing that you want to do before your first data meeting. You want to set norms. Now, norms is different than your success criteria. Your norms, I cannot count the number of times I've worked with schools, both instructional leadership teams and teachers, and I've talked about setting norms for the work that we're doing, and I'm either met with crickets or I'm met with people saying, rules, right? Like they're stating a list of rules. We want to be sure that we come on time. We want to be sure that we have our materials ready. We want to be kind. These are a given, right? I would assume that because you are a professional, you're going to show up on time, right? That's an expectation from me as the leader. It is the expectation that you come in to this room for this data meeting on time. That's not a norm, because our norms are commitments that we're making for the work to be successful. So if this is our success criteria, then what do we need to commit to? One of the questions I like to ask when I'm working with teams around norms is, what do I need from you? What do you need from me? And what do we need from each other for this meeting to be successful? And when we say successful, here's what we mean by that. This was the success criteria that we identified, okay? So when we are looking at your school year, here is my challenge to you. Really consider the assumptions that you might be making about what people know about data, how people know how to analyze data. Do people really know how to have conversations? And have you talked about what's going to happen when it feels uncomfortable or difficult, or when someone feels like the data is really personal to them and they maybe are feeling victimized? Have you talked about those things? Have you talked about who's going to facilitate these data meetings? Have you talked about the role of the teachers and other staff members in these meetings? All of this needs to take place. So again, advocating for you within the first 6 weeks of school, before those first data meetings start to happen, really consider how can we prepare our people and set them up for success so data meetings don't feel so uncomfortable, and so that after we leave data meetings, we see change happening, not only in teacher action, but also in student learning, okay? And here's the way we do that. We train on the purpose. What are the different purposes for data meetings? What is the success criteria? And what are the norms that we are going to follow, okay? So again, this was a brief overview. I have so many other components to this training, and I would absolutely love to visit more with you about this. So if you are interested in talking about what it could look like to do a virtual session with you and your instructional leadership team around this session, or if you would like to have someone like me come out to your campus or district to do a training on this so you're prepared for future data meetings, let me know. Again, schedule a call with me, email me at casey@claritydriven.com. I love to have conversations. I'll grab a cup of coffee. I'll sit back and listen to what's going on and what your experience is where you are. Okay, guys, as always, I want to know what was most useful for you from this episode. Be sure you're dropping in the comments, sending me an email, commenting on LinkedIn or YouTube. And until next time, be sure that you are being the person who is creating clarity for your people so that you can build not only your capacity as a leader, but their capacity as employees. See you later. Hey, listener, I am so honored that you listened to today's episode, and I hope you gained something valuable from it. I'd also be honored if you did me 3 solid favors. First, subscribe to this show. I've got a lot of great content coming up, and I don't want you to miss any of it. Second, be sure you're following me on social media platforms. You can find me at Catch Up with Casey on LinkedIn or Instagram. And finally, if you are looking to book a dynamic and relatable speaker for your next event, conference, or retreat, I would love to bring a message about how the craft of clarity makes a significant impact on both leadership and life. Until next time, always remember, clarity precedes capacity.